It's Spoilerin time, my friends. Welcome to the show where we talk about the stuff we watch. Our companion show, Cordkillers, helps us to figure out where to watch it, how to watch it, what to pick to watch. Here, we pick things to watch and we spoil them. We're going to be talking about Miami Vice, Season 4, Episode 2, Amen, Send Money, with a guest appearance by Ben Stiller. We're going to talk about 2521, Season 1, Episode 10. And we're going to talk about The Last of Us, Season 1, Episode 2. I'm Tom Merritt. He's Brian Brushwood.
Heck yeah. Where are we starting here, Tom?
Let's start with the Last of Us. The last shall be first. The Last of Us, Season 1, Episode 2. One thing I will say, as someone who has not played the game and does not know what's coming, is that both of these episodes so far have flown by. Every time the credits roll, I'm like, what? No, we're already at the end. The pacing for me has been fantastic. Also, I would say, do not have 2 donuts on a plate as a snack while watching episode 2 of Last of Us.
Oh my God.
As soon as the clickers show up, you are not going to want to eat anything.
I was trying to eat during the opening scene when that's when they were doing all the cutting up that corpse and all.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah,
That's right. The autopsy.
Yeah.
Not a good time to eat chicken wings. Not a good time for chicken wings. Nope.
My version of that was I had one request from both my wife and from my 15-year-old daughter. They both independently said, we would prefer to not be around other people. Could we just, the 3 of us, watch this? And I was like, sure, whatever you want. And then only the next day I was like, oh yeah, if I was 15 watching a bunch of grown men looking at a naked corpse be examined, I might be all like, could I not be doing this around grown men?
Yeah. I mean, not that there's anything remotely titillating about
No. In
that
fact,
scene,
that's
right?
probably the problem.
Yeah, exactly.
Problem.
Well, I that contributes to the reaction. Is that what you're trying to say, Brian?
Yeah, well, look, I remember being 15. It's like everything's complicated enough. The last thing you want is to be processing complicated things with a bunch of grown men around you, you know?
Yeah.
It's like, oh yeah, no, that tracks.
Yeah, you don't want to have to explain or think. Yeah, I totally get that. I did, yeah. The clicker attack later, we were like, this is worse than trying to eat while watching Game of Thrones or House of the Dragon.
So
for sure.
I assume you had seen here or there some clicker moments from the video game, but this is officially, I guess, your first clicker encounter. Do you like the whole echolocation device as a plot device to make you terrified and make you ASMR style feel like they're right there over your shoulder?
It was crazy how A Quiet Place it suddenly felt, where when you saw the movie A Quiet Place in the movies and somebody crinkled some popcorn or something, everybody in the theater was like, "Ah, you're gonna get us all killed!" Right? There was that feeling during those scenes of like, okay, I get it. They can't see me, so just stay still. My God, stay still. Don't move. Don't make any. Yeah, absolutely worked.
So I know that we like to view art as completely self-contained, but in this case, I got to give a nod to some interview that I had read where they explicitly, the co-creators, guy from Chernobyl, guy who co-wrote the
Craig
video
Mazin
game.
and Druckmann.
Yes. There was a call out of the fact that in episode 1, they talk about how they're not having flour because they're on Atkins or whatever, and that's brought up. And 2, we get this backstory in Indonesia where 14 people were infected at one of the largest. Indonesia apparently is a breadbasket of flour processing or whatever. And the question put to them is like, are we supposed to believe that this is all flour is the transmitting vector? And they said, yes, that's explicit. We did our best to write that out writ large, which for whatever reason, just right over my head, even though I've watched the first episode 3 times and the second one twice. But I was glad
connection
to have
to
that
the first
explained.
episode went over my head until you said it just now. I'm like, oh, okay, yeah, that would make sense.
Yeah. But I thought the second episode I thought was great. I think they do a pretty good job of faking you out to letting you believe that maybe Tess will be around longer. Nope. They also.
I knew that the story is about Joel and Ellie And so I was like, well, we're going to be losing Tess at some point. So I wasn't like shocked when it happened, but I wasn't sure. I wasn't sure if it was going to be this episode or next episode. So yeah, they kept me guessing.
Yeah. Tell me your thoughts before I ruin everything.
I mean, honestly, that the I I think 2/3 of my thoughts are out there, which is like the pacing is incredible for me. It just pulls me along. The horror is visceral and terrifying, and in a way that made me not want to eat at all, and definitely jumped at sounds. And the development of the characters is almost unnoticeable because of the pacing and everything else that's going on. You're just worried about what's happening, and so it's a fun discovery when you realize, oh, we're getting a moment for Joel to get to know Ellie, and Ellie very clearly is, got a personality that's not going to be amenable to just your basic like, so where are you from kind of mentality. And that was a really fun moment when they tried to have a conversation for the first time, really, that they'd ever had a moment to like, well, I guess we should talk. And so yeah, I'm loving the show.
There was one change that was made, um, that I don't know if you even knew was different from the video game, but I liked very, very much as a story building mechanic. The idea that essentially threads of the fungus could act as a single very long neuron, and you could touch one
The
and
mycelial network thing.
yes,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
then a mile away. In this case, we see all of the infected suddenly become aware and start running over. Loved all of that. I thought that was very, very good.
I did not know that was a change until I read something that not only that, but the fact that it was the Fedra that were after them, I guess, in the game at this point, and instead it's the clickers that are after them. Really, I
Mhm.
guess both. But
Yeah. In Tessa's big sacrifice scene. Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
And I think they kept like the details of that scene, right? Where she like does try to do the lighter thing, and it takes her a long time in the game even, where you're like, oh, I didn't even think she might not even do this. It's great. There's great tension there. I think they do a good job of giving Tess just enough screen time for, like was mentioned, like there's a little bit of a fake out that you're going to see a lot of her, because nope. In fact, speaking about Tess, one of I guess I think they have a companion podcast to this, or something, and I think they mentioned that the cold open was going to be Tess's backstory instead of the Indonesia thing that we see, and I think it's better that we don't get it. We don't need a lot of Tess. We don't need to cry about Tess and her son. Those things are not
Yeah,
germane to
and
the speed of this thing.
I too am really glad about that, because like I care about Tess insofar as she's a mirror image of Joel. She's somebody who went through. We get it. Terrible. Everybody went through a terrible, terrible thing leading up until this moment. And I would like just a little hint here and there. I mean, I wouldn't be upset if the beginning of every single episode of the series just gave us a little taste of what 2003 looked like.
Yeah, I was the very tiniest bit confused when we opened in Jakarta. It took me no more than a second to realize, oh, there's too many people. This is obviously a flashback. But they didn't give us a year or anything. That said, I caught it really fast and realized, oh, okay, we're getting more backstory. I forgot we got the backstory by the end of the show. So I don't know that it was important now, but what I have a feeling is going to happen is, the way we got the backstory, right? We got the 1960s interview at the beginning of episode 1. We're going to continue to get these little elements at the beginning that are going to weave their own narrative of this is how we got there, including things like, oh, it's a flower processing. Well, that's a great vector. Ah, okay. So now I'm starting to understand how this spread around, and even if each one of them alone doesn't contribute to the story it's in, I trust them enough at this point to say like, yeah, this is all good info. I imagine it's going to fit in great.
Shouts out to the set piece design, the aesthetic that we have. As a kid, I remember on cable television seeing Logan's Run and being amazed at this overgrown
Yeah.
kudzu,
Uh-huh.
in Washington D.C. that
Yeah.
that is made. I loved it in the video game. I love it here. It's great. I really enjoy it. It also caused me to a good story will oftentimes just get me for hours at a time, just sort of musing on what else, what else, what else. And one of the things I found myself was realizing that technology pretty much stopped advancing in 2003. And I started thinking and enumerating all of the things that just don't exist. Never was an iPhone, smartphones, cellular
Hmm.
technology.
Yeah.
How many
Yeah.
how many satellites are still out there? How many have fallen to the no GPS? It's a wonderful world, and I'm glad that they give so much runway for people to just sit and think about it.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of that set design as you are. The sort of overgrown, slightly familiar. That scene where Ellie walks in is like, nah, but I've read about this stuff, and she goes up and is like, yes, sir, I would like your finest suite. That was charming. I love that. That was so good.
Yeah, it's gorgeous. It's visually rich. The characters are rich. Uh, I think most people, based on the marketing, will not be surprised that we lose Tess in this episode. We know this is a story. We still have basically. I mean, Tess was the alpha of the group. She was the one adult
Yep.
who knew what's what and was the one that everybody leaned on as a touchstone. So now going into episode 3, we're robbed of her, and now we're forced with two lesser siblings basically who don't seem to like each other all that much coming together, and I'm very excited.
Bryce, anything else to add to this?
No, I thought it was a great episode. I think they're doing a really good job of skipping a lot of yada yada yadas. And I'm interested to see what they do next.
That is The Last of Us, season 1, episode 2. Let's talk about 2521, season 1, episode 10. Now, last week, Bryce and I discussed it and kind of explained what happened to Brian. Brian, did you go back and rewatch it all, or did you just jump into 10 based on what we
No,
said?
so I figured there were two paths. I could either do the Tom advised Bryce slicing of everything, or I could just watch all of this episode. So I chose to watch all of this episode.
I'm
And
so sorry.
well,
But you didn't. But Tom was asked about last week's
no.
109.
We were doing the show, so it didn't.
Yeah,
it didn't
what
stick
Brian
with
says
me.
is instead of watching 109, he watched all of 110 without skipping. Is
Correct,
that right?
correct. Yes,
Yeah.
yes.
Okay.
And so from context, it becomes very clear. You're like, oh, our two main characters are getting along. We're doing a spring break episode, something chaperone, something. Getting ahead in UBS or what? Is everyone okay? Is everyone okay?
Yeah.
How do you make a boring beach episode?
So the episode, in my estimation, is decent at the beginning because you have a great interaction between Hido and Yejin about Yejin's confession at the end of 109, right? And he's like, yeah, I don't need you to say anything. That's not what love is, and that's when this series to me is at its best, when it's doing those sorts of conversations. You quickly get into a long bit. The stuff with Yurim and his dad, where he takes a call from dad, and we're establishing that Yurim's family has financial troubles and that Yurim feels bad about those financial troubles, but she wants to do what's right. I feel like that could be done much more efficiently. And then we have the seat cushion stuff and the school stuff, which I'm not even sure how important that is. But the beach stuff, while it does have a lot of padding, I'm not going to dispute that. There are some great moments in there that are setting you up for what I think is the point of this series.
It does. It felt to me as kind of this codifying moment where it's like, no, this is this is, you never recognize it at the time, but that coming of age moment where all of you were at the lake house at that same time where that thing happened or whatever. I felt like that's what they were establishing so that they could begin to torture us and take parts of it away.
Well, and that's the key element to me. The key elements of this episode are at the beginning and the end. At the beginning, when you see that rest of that conversation on the bridge, and at the end, when the daughter brings up like, when you went to the beach, and the mom's like, went to the beach, and you've just spent all this time seeing like the heart wrenching importance of that moment and how excited they were for it. And yes, they overdo that, but I think that's an important element of this episode, is that as important as that was, the mom is like, I don't remember that. And so why is that?
It
Why do you think it is that she's telling her daughter like, oh, I guess we went to the beach. I don't know.
it was hammered on so heavily that it almost tickled like a sci-fi spidey sense in me. But I
Mm,
was like, I don't think that's the case. I think maybe they're just saying that what matters to one person doesn't necessarily matter to another person very much.
mm. Yeah, I would say you're right to resist the this is not a sci. We're not going to get a sci-fi explanation. Bryce, was the whole thing just too much for you?
It was just a little slower than the past couple of episodes were. It in the past the two previous episodes, I mentioned on the show that I ended up kind of missing your cues on what bits to skip because I really liked the episode. And this was one where I really kept checking my watch on like a lot of montages, a lot of slow
Did
motion
you
playing the
skip?
scene.
Did you skip the parts I told you to
I
skip?
did
Though?
skip the parts that you did mention to skip, and then some other parts.
The
Yeah, but
is it Eugen the
Ejin? Yeah, Becky
yeah
Jin.
yeah so when Eugen gets dressed down by his boss at UBS, is that still about him hanging up, or is did he screw up another time?
No, this is about in the last episode they're shooting a part of the documentary in the studio to introduce the series. And his boss wanted to have them redo the touch, and he's kind of like playing up the controversy. Yijin doesn't want to do that, partly because he's afraid that she'll get hurt. And so he he basically dresses down his boss in front of the employees, and that's when his mentor there says, you should probably apologize. And so he goes and apologizes, and then he kind of realizes in that dinner scene that when his boss's boss, like the big boss, is like, I heard you apologize. Oh, okay. And then the high school thing and all of that it's like, oh, I guess that's my role here. Why am I trying to behave? Everyone's going to see me, as the high school dropout, or the uneducated person. I might as well just go ahead and give up and drink and stop trying to be responsible. It doesn't have to do with the hang up of the call.
Is there either a chronological gap culturally between now and when this takes place, or a cultural gap between me in the United States and Korea that that was it normal for him to get dressed down like he tried to apologize and the boss pulled him into the stairwell and then just reads him the riot act, or like all
I
of
didn't
that
feel
felt
like that was a
kind of
cultural specific thing. I just felt like that was, what a jerky boss does, is
yeah.
pretend to be nice in front of the rest of the people, and then like in the stairwell give him the story of like, you're nothing, and don't ever do that to me again. That felt independent of culture to me.
Yeah, I guess what I'm teasing at is it landed with me as cartoonish and old fashioned, and I thought, well, maybe I'm not aware of some other
Yeah,
reason.
I don't know if it's supposed to be realistic, and like that's the way it was back then in the 90s kind of situation. There's certainly and I'm not going to try to pretend to speak for Korean culture, but there's certainly I'm aware of a drinking culture of, you go out. That part is a little bit different than what we do in the United States, where everyone's expected to come and expected to drink and expected to participate. But the dressing down part, I think, yeah, maybe that's just trying to say like, hey, back then people still acted like that.
Yeah.
Anything
um,
else, Bryce? Brian?
not No, it's just no.
Hey,
I saw-
remember when they didn't know how to make rice and they made too much rice and then it was like a bunch of tension about
They're
the
just
right
really
amount.
overdoing
and then
the fact
suddenly,
that
like,
these are inexperienced
10
kids.
seconds later, all of a sudden, Eugene had made all of the right amount of
Yeah,
everything.
he found a rice cooker. That's probably what happened. I mean, thank God.
Yeah. Boring beach episode. Just, I don't know. Maybe it's an anime thing, but it's a boring beach episode. I don't know.
Yeah, there are large stretches of this. I'm not going to dispute, but
Yeah.
I think the sort of ASMR portion,
Oh.
maybe you found that boring. I liked that.
ASMR, was that a cut? Was
Where,
that a time
where
cut?
he's
No,
sitting and he's
yeah.
like, just listen, and they share the headphones.
And they're like,
Oh.
be real quiet, and also
Yeah.
lean into this mic, and also let's whisper.
You know it's a television show, right?
Yeah.
No, but the point was to show them interacting that way.
Yeah.
It wasn't to give you ASMR.
I don't know. I think there's some amount of the audience that really dug the ASMR
Yeah,
happening.
I'm sure that's probably true. Yeah.
They're getting real lovey-dovey very quick. I mean,
But they already
but-
dropped the L-bomb, right?
He did. She did.
She did not.
And that's one of the things I love about this is that he says it and is like, I don't, it doesn't matter what you think. That's how I feel. And she's like, oh, okay, that's cool.
I actually do feel like that here in America, as I grew up, we had a tendency to fetishize, that moment that you admit that you love someone or whatever. I am of a different mind now where it's like, I'll tell everyone all the time that I love them. And it was nice to see that moment that she's like, well, what do I do with this? And he's like, whatever you want. It's just how I feel. I think
Yeah.
you're great. I love you. And
No.
it's like,
And that is unusual in these kinds of stories.
yeah. And dare I say, healthy, a good way to
Yes.
be.
Absolutely. All right. Yeah. So again, even number. I've noticed Bryce tends to dislike the even numbered episodes a little more than the odd number episodes.
Oh,
so Maybe
interesting.
there's hope for you next time. We'll see.
I did like the cliffhanger. I did like where we ended. I loved going and talking to the mom, and the mom totally forgot. Because, of course, she forgot it happened 20 years ago.
Yes, exactly. Also realistic. Like, I feel like some of the over the top beach montage, here's how wonderful it is meant for painting contrast. And yeah, they paint it very starkly, but it's meant to say, gosh, don't you see how emotional this is, and the sparklers on the beach, and how I actually teared up a little bit. I'm cheesy, but I was like, oh yeah, I remember having times like that. That those were good times when you're young and silly and dumb, and then to come back to that reality at the end, I thought was good.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Well, you never played sparklers on the beach, huh, Bryce?
You know what? We were not a Sparklers. We were a Bottle Rocket family.
Yeah.
To be honest, Bryce and I, before the show, it's like, look, I'm almost certain Tom's going to bring up the sparklers on the beach. Let's not one-up him.
Right.
We don't want to diminish
With the
that
bottle
moment.
I'll just
rockets.
let it.
Yeah.
He doesn't need to know about the Roman candle traditions.
Correct,
He just
correct.
he
We
can
had
be on his
Roman
own.
candles growing up.
Oh, I'm sure you had some, but
But wait, you probably set
haven't.
fire to them.
The
The
Who
bottle
knows?
rockets,
Who knows?
the band is from the
You
Midwest.
could still have them now. I mean,
All right, that's 2521, season 1, episode 10. Let's talk Miami Vice, season 4, episode 2. Amen. Send money with Fast Freddy, aka Ben Stiller, as well as a televangelist story. Brian, what did you think of this version of a televangelist in Florida story versus the one we have been
the
watching
previous
on
one with
HBO?
Phil
Yeah.
Collins, or yeah.
There's no righteous gemstones aspect to this as much.
I don't
is there?
know. There's a lot of DNA that would later become righteous gemstones. There's also a prescient amount of evangelism based on abundance, about like the idea, and we see this, in Houston, Texas. Joel Osteen preaches that God wants you to be wealthy and be successful or whatever. I actually thought this was a quite good episode. First of all, not the least of which was the real guest star was Brian Dennehy, who's amazing,
Yeah.
and a genuine twist in that they didn't do dare I say, the lazy thing and just let him
Right.
be the sleazebag, but instead, like, firmly establish halfway through, nope, he's a true believer.
He's really a good guy.
And
yeah.
all of that rhetoric that he was engaged in about how he's suffering on a cross of silk or whatever. Yeah, no, he is aware that he knows how the world perceives him, and he does not care because he's serving a higher power, and he's willing to have the whole world thinks he's a piece of garbage if that is what will bring his mission to the world at large. I liked it a lot. Also, we got the principal from Back to the Future. To be honest, Ben Stiller was a very forgettable one-note character in this. I feel like everything else was really fascinating because I was left not knowing exactly how much everybody believed everything. I mean, there were moments of Walton Goggins and Righteous Gemstones, and I loved it. I think it's one of the best episodes.
It was
also,
a surprisingly
how great
good
does Rico
episode.
look with a beard?
That too, right? Yeah, I was very sure I was not going to enjoy or be very bored by the plot on this. I knew Dennehy was good, so I'm like, well, thank goodness we have him, and I'll get to see the Ben Stiller scene. And I was shocked when they led me down the garden path a couple of times where I'm like, oh, they wanted me to think that Billy Bob was legit, but oh, I guess they really still want me to think that Billy Bob is legit. Oh, we're at the end of the episode. I guess he really, like even by the end, I was like, there was no reveal. That really was how it worked with him, and the principal from Back to the Future was the bad guy. Yeah, that was crazy. And like you say, Ben Stiller's appearance here is so fast, like his character's name, Fast Eddie Fletcher. You could blink and miss it, and it's almost entirely unimportant to the story as well.
Though a very technically impressive scene. That is a one-shot scene for a
Yeah.
very, very long bit of it. It's a very long, very fast monologue that he delivers. It's certainly technically impressive.
Also, I believe
felt
it's
like
Fast Eddie
I was looking at Ben
Felcher.
Stiller. Fast Eddie, what did I say? Phillips?
Fletcher. I think it's
Oh,
Felcher
okay.
or
Yeah,
something.
Felcher.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're right.
Yeah.
No, it's Fast Eddie Felcher. But yeah, he was very much Ben Stiller. If Ben Stiller ever had to do that part, which I don't think he would ever agree to do again, but that's what I would expect Ben Stiller to be able to throw down if that's what they gave him, right?
The opening and closing scenes were kind of they punched above their weight for being a Friday night primetime broadcast television TV show. Where it begins, it was surprising to see Brian Dennehy unabashedly, unapologetically praising materialism, complete with essentially what 20, 30 years later would become the law of attraction principles, if you believe in The Secret and all that stuff, the gospel of abundance and all that stuff. And then I also believed him at the end, where it's like, well, here's where we are. We have nothing. And I honestly couldn't tell whether or not we were meant to be disgusted by the fact that the dollars started rolling in as soon as he told his truth, or whether or not did you get the impression that we were supposed to hate them at the end, or whether or not the real treasure they had was in the stories they were telling and just
I
money was
got the
rolling in?
impression that this is one of those cases where they're like, we, the storytellers, are not making a judgment. This is a character, and this is what this character did. And you, the listener, will have to decide. Do you think he's moral? Do you think he's amoral? Do you think he's somewhere else? And I loved that. Because I thought clearly when they showed him at the beginning, like, oh, this is our villain. They're very obviously setting him up to be a villain because he's saying all these things about, that are hypocritical and stuff. And then they didn't do that. I thought that was incredibly interesting.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, whether or not the money came in, the fact that that was the hill that they tried to elicit sympathy from. It's like, oh, look at me, my financial domination scheme is not.
You mean from the audience or from his audience in the world of the story?
I guess just the details of them doing that monologue in the wreckage of the studio. This, you know what? This episode is so weird. This episode is like a cartoon. I almost texted you guys to ask if this was Miami Vice because this is a really left field for Miami Vice.
I
the
agree.
beginning is very
I
cartoony.
agree.
I'll give you that. Yeah.
There's a lot. I only wrote this down. I don't remember who said this, but at some point someone goes, "I've been to jail. Jail sucks."
Oh, that's the wife who's in the middle of getting busted
right.
buying drugs.
Also, okay, here's one. Rico, why did you meet her at the studio?
Look, there's a lot of structural problems.
It's so stupid that they
is
don't.
Entirely unbelievable that someone as experienced as Detective Ricardo Tubbs would be like, well, I guess and then they called the worst part is they called him on it. Rico, why'd you go down there? And he doesn't have a good answer.
No, he doesn't.
However,
they don't even tell you that they're doing it because it's so stupid. You just have to look at that pedestal thing and be like, hey, is that the pedestal thing for their stupid team? What the hell?
Also, the full 1 minute scientific moment where he explains how much power goes through a broadcast antenna, and then he's like, "What's going on?" He's like, "Night school. Vice isn't forever." I'm like, okay.
Also, whoever
Since
Switek
when,
is, Switek's actor must have blackmailed on someone. They gave him 3 like stop and go one-liners in this episode, where he "Hey Switek, you want the last word on this?" And that's the patrol.
Well,
Like, okay, Switek.
that's the line that my contract requires I get in order to be paid.
Like
for
they
this
stop
episode. Yeah. No, you're right. Also, when Mason Mather is climbing the tower and we're waiting for him to get electrocuted, it was a little grueling. I was like,
and
we all
also,
know what's about to happen.
That was one of those like more cartoonish than usual for Miami Vice that cut to reaction shots and hilarious Looney Tunes sound effects of somebody being electrocuted.
Yeah. The story is incredibly interesting and surprising.
It's overcomplicated. What?
Yeah. No, I didn't think it was overcomplicated.
Okay.
Well, I don't think the through line was overcomplicated. There's certainly things like the climbing the tower that are overcomplicated.
I think that before I had seen the Righteous Gemstones, I would have thought it was overly complicated. But after having seen that, I'm like, yeah, okay, it's about 30 to 40% of a Righteous Gemstones plot arrangement where it's
For
like
sure,
everybody
yeah.
works in this same market and they all know everybody's gimmicks and backstory and that kind of thing.
Yeah, but it's a different genre.
Yes. No, I mean, it's not as good as
It was
Righteous
a
Gemstones.
weird Miami Vice. It was a weird genre for Miami Vice to treat, and I actually enjoyed that. I was like, well, that's interesting. That's different. Which is the reputation Miami Vice had at the time. We've talked about it before, but don't forget, Miami Vice was considered to be the groundbreaking show of its time, even if it doesn't look as much like that.
Speaking of which, we're getting near the end of our journey. Like we're now on season 4, and we're seeing
there's only 5 seasons.
We're seeing the changes where it's like we've got Rico rocking a beard, we've got Crockett no longer quite with a mullet, just sort of a more traditional lion's mane of a hairstyle. I'm gonna be sad when we're finished. This is a good show.
It's fun to watch, and it's surprising where it's good. It's good in places that I wouldn't have expected, and it's also bad in places that I wouldn't have expected either from a primetime television show.
Man, I love seeing that same street though. That same street that we keep seeing them walk down. Good.
That
street.
one that they have the permit for. So yeah. Next week, Miguel Ferrer from Twin Peaks. Do you remember him?
No, I don't.
He played he was also in a lot of crime shows, so you'll probably recognize him from other stuff if you don't. But in Twin Peaks, he was the guy that was sent to look into Agent Cooper when Cooper was accused of things. He was sent by the FBI to kind of follow up.
I know.
That will be next week. That is Death and the Lady, season 4, episode 3. We don't always go in order. We sometimes skip, but we haven't been skipping lately. That is going to do it for Miami Vice season 4, episode 2. Like I said, next week, Miami Vice Season 4, Episode 3, Death and the Lady. Also, The Last of Us, Season 1, Episode 3. And 2521, Season 1, Episode 11. And there are only 16 episodes of 2521. So we are getting towards the end of that story. Don't forget, folks, you get these episodes earlier if you subscribe at patreon.com/Cordkillers. You also get them broken up nicely, and you get bonuses like your own RSS feed, exclusive After Talk podcast, updates directly to your invite. What is wrong with me today? Updates directly to your inbox. Doesn't matter what your dental situation is, you will get that update in your inbox. Thank you, everyone, for supporting us at patreon.com/Cordkillers. We'll spoil you again next time.
Good job, Tom.
Thank you.
You talk pretty.
Diamond Club hopes you have enjoyed this program.